Lock up Grandma. And while you're at it, why not a little girl?
Get this goddamn chain off me! Look, girl, you've been running wild on me.
HBO has delivered unto us the best post-apocalyptic show since my wife left me. Please take me back, Stephanie. In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into the series, comparisons to the game, lore, Easter eggs, and a whole lot more. This is a non-spoiler breakdown, so anything beyond episode 1 will not be discussed. Now make sure to like and subscribe because I may not always cover the shows you watch, but when I do...
It's pretty sweet.
If you're wondering just how bad TV was in the 1960s, look no further than ABC's primetime lineup of riveting epidemiologists. Among them is Dr. Newman, who, unlike Dr. Schoenheis over here, who moonlights as Lurch, believes humanity shouldn't be as concerned about viruses or bacteria, rather fungi.
What? Fungi.
A fungal infection could theoretically take over our minds, use us as hosts, and spread from person to person. Luckily, fungi can't survive in hosts with an internal temperature over 94 degrees. The average human is 98. However, if the world's climate got slightly warmer, fungi would have to adapt to survive. Fast forward 36 years later, and that's exactly what's happened with the origin of the cordyceps brain infection, or CBI for short. It's the name of the parasitic fungus that has taken over the world in The Last of Us. In the first few minutes of the game, Sarah Miller, our protagonist's daughter, picks up a newspaper outlining its mysterious origins. According to the Texas Herald, a mysterious infection caused by contaminated crops imported from South America seemed to be the culprit. And if you look very closely, you can see the date is September 26, 2013. September 26 is also the date the events of the beginning of the show take place. However, the creators have changed the show version to 2003 instead of 2013. This was done so that when we see Joel 20 years in the future, it's 2023 and not 2033 when the events of the game take place. The show's intro credits depict this growing fungus, and as you can see, it's similar to the game's intro. Our first shot, set in 2003, is an homage to the title screen of The Last of Us Remastered, both depicting drapes swaying in the window. In the game, many of the posters for bands and movies had to be fake for copyright reasons. For example, there's The Bash, a take on The Clash, which we can see HBO got the rights to, along with Destiny's Child, which would have been a huge group in 2003. Both the game and TV version have Sarah's butterfly pillow. In fact, butterflies appear all throughout the show, like here in the kitchen and even in Joel's apartment in the future. Butterflies often symbolize metamorphosis and change, and if there's a character who needs to change, it's definitely Joel, but I'll get into that in a bit. Even Joel's room has some fun Easter eggs from the game, from the treadmill with a towel on the side, the painting of a moose above the bed, and even the color and style of the blanket. If this is the attention to detail the production designers are taking with this show, it's giving me high hopes for the rest of the season. In the corner, we can see Joel's guitar case, which in the show has been replaced with a poster of one. The actual guitar we'll actually see later in the living room. Joel's love for music, in particular the guitar, plays a substantial thematic role in the game, so it'll be interesting how far they incorporate this in the show. Unlike the game, which basically starts the night of the infection, the show eases us into the world of 2003 Austin, Texas. It's Joel's birthday, and I kinda chuckled when he said he was 36. If you pay close attention to the radio, you can hear Dido's White Flag, which would have released 2 months prior in July of 2003. Its chorus has the memorable line, "I will go down with this ship," a fitting song considering what's about to happen. We also hear a news report of, quote, disturbances in Jakarta. It's unclear if this has anything to do with the infection or with the clashes the Indonesian military had with separatists that year. Yes, I'm a big nerd. Sarah's shirt is the same from the game and features a fake band named Halcyon Drops, which is said to be named after a doll of one of the creator's daughters. Notice too the purple color. So far, Sarah, Tess, and Ellie, all women that are close or will become close to Joel, have worn these colors. Purple symbolizes, among other things, spiritual growth, and Joel has a lot of growing to do if he's going to grow as a character. We also learn that Joel and his brother Tommy seem to be contractors. In the game, they're carpenters. And you might be asking yourself, where is Joel's wife? In the game, we don't know much about her, just that whatever occurred between them is too painful to talk about, and that she left him shortly after Sarah was born, leaving him to raise her on his own. Meanwhile, Sarah borrows her father's broken watch and some money to surprise him for his birthday by having it fixed, later stating,
"You were never going to do it for yourself, so..."
This is especially true in the future when he has that same watch damaged and still unfixed from the night of Sarah's murder. It's like he wears a constant reminder of her death everywhere he goes. What I found really interesting here is the amount of time spent on this knife with horses engraved on it. At this time, I've only seen the first episode, but knowing how much Ellie loves her switchblade, I put my money on Joel gifting this to her in the future. Next door are the Adlers and their invalid mother, Connie. This is a new addition to the show, and later shows us just how this fungal infection can transform someone who's wheelchair-bound into a bloodthirsty maniac. On the back of Tommy's car is an Operation Desert Storm veteran bumper sticker. Tommy was never in Desert Storm in the game, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the show. For those interested, the Old Ironsides are the 1st Armored Division of the US Army. There's also a fun moment where Joe tells Tommy to put out his cigarette when in the future Joel will risk his life getting cigarettes in order to radio Tommy. Well, it wouldn't be Texas without old George W. on the wall, the president in 2003. I thought this scene was pretty funny considering the teacher is teaching them about adverbs, something she says they'll definitely need later in life. Kinda like when my algebra teacher said my YouTube career would go nowhere and to get back to doing my polynomials. At the clock shop, Sarah gets Joel's watch repaired before being shooed out. Cop cars, fire trucks, and SWAT are swarming the city, and something is definitely up. Time has played an important role in the Last of Us games, with its major acts split into seasons. In the first half of this episode, almost every scene has a clock that tells us the time, from when Sarah wakes up at 7:08 a.m., the clock at school, or when she awakes to the sound of explosions at 2:16 a.m. Sarah pays a visit to Mrs. Adler. Their home is adorned with Bibles, pictures of Jesus, and even an organ, no doubt to play hymns that haunted me as a child.
People out there need to get right with Jesus.
Even their dog is named Mercy, ironic since their family is killed in the most merciless manner. Sarah is on the lookout for a premium DVD. Remember those? In particular, Curtis and Viper 2. Because what Christian-loving home doesn't have an ultra-violent action film? In the game, we learn Joel is really into these films.
What movie you guys gonna watch? What's Joel into?
Curtis and Viper 2.
Later in the episode, we'll even see a worn-out Curtis and Viper 2 poster in Boston. Scarier than the DVD of Franklin Plays Hockey or the fact Murderball is here, which didn't come out until 2005, is Connie in the background acting very strange. She'll eventually succumb to the fungi infection, and it's briefly mentioned that she may have picked this up in the city while on one of her many hospital visits. Overhead, fighter jets scramble, and here I am trying to figure out if this was the actual September 2003 issue of 17 magazine. Here's the actual October 2003 issue, which would have come out in September, and it has the same title, Get Great Style, but a different cover. Why do I bring this up? No reason, I'm just an insane person. Late from work, Joel's forgot the cake he was supposed to get for his birthday. Regardless, he and Sarah celebrate, and she gives him that repaired watch. In the game, it's a completely new watch. Their time, however, is cut short when Joel receives a call from Tommy in jail. He was in yet another bar fight and needs his big bro to bail him out because if he doesn't do it tonight, he'll be there all weekend because it's a Friday. And yes, September 26, 2003 did land on a Friday. Tommy isn't featured heavily in this episode, however we're starting to get a picture of what he's like, an ex-military vet with pent-up anger who drinks a bit too much and is quick to use force. With her father out picking up Tommy, Sarah awakens to explosions and helicopters whirring overhead. The TV alerts everyone to stay indoors, so obviously Sarah's not going to do that. She checks in on the Adlers to make the gruesome discovery that Grandma Connie has had one too many of those raisin cookies. This is our first sighting of an infected. What I found really interesting and creepy here were the tentacle-like tendrils coming out of her mouth, which seem to aid in providing sustenance to its host body. It's gross as hell. Luckily, Joel and Tommy arrive in the nick of time to put Grandma down in an absolutely gut-wrenching scene. Tommy somehow has a gun, but I chalk that up to him being a good old Texas boy. In their escape from Austin, we really get to see who Joel is as a character, ignoring families who need help on the side of the road, and my favorite, leaving his neighbors to get eaten.
Denise, get back inside the house! You lock your doors now!
A few moments later.
In the video game version, it's not Grandma who's killed, but their neighbor Jimmy.
Jimmy, just stay back! Jimmy, I am warning you!
The show has a little nod to Jimmy when they pass the burning farmhouse.
God. It's Jimmy's place.
In the game, this building belongs to a guy named Lewis.
That's Lewis's farm.
There are some amazing, almost shot-for-shot moments from the game here, and as someone who absolutely loves the game, it brought me tremendous joy.
Nothing brings me joy anymore, not even food.
This entire sequence is chaotic. The armies block the highway, they're unsure how the virus spreads, and cell phone and radios are all down. The plan as it stands is to go through town, past the golf course by the river, and pick up the highway past the southern blockade. Going into town was not the best idea. I love how a film called Midnight Madness is playing in the theater as panicked theater goers stampede out. And this episode's background actor award goes to this woman who is so creepy just standing there throughout the chaos. A slight departure from the game is the addition of this massive airplane crash which sends what appears to be some shrapnel through the car as the camera cuts to black. In the game version, their car gets T-boned, but the outcome is the same. Joel and Sarah get cut off from Tommy, and Sarah can't walk, forcing Joel to carry her. They're soon chased by an infected, and notice the markings on his face. They're very similar to the ones found on Ellie after she informs Tess and Joel that she's resistant to the infection, but we'll get more into that in a bit. These infected are insanely fast, and luckily for Joel and Sarah, the one hot in their tails is killed by a soldier. What follows is almost identical in both versions. The soldier gets the order to kill Joel and Sarah, fearing they could be infected. The soldier shoots, Tommy kills him, but it's too late. Sarah is killed in the process. This is arguably the most important moment in all of The Last of Us Part 1, as it shapes Joel into the man he becomes and provides the backbone for his relationship with Ellie. It's hard for Joel to get close to people because he knows the pain of having to lose them. This is why we'll see his relationship with Ellie start off as transactional. She's cargo and that's it. 20 years later, we're in post-apocalyptic Boston, which looks slightly better than what it looks like now. A boy collapses on the outskirts of the walled-off quarantine zone, which is manned by FEDRA, or Federal Disaster Response Agency, the ruling authority amalgamated with the US military to oversee these quarantine zones. Like in the game, humans are tested with these CBI scanners to see if they're infected, and this boy gets red, indicating he's infected. It's likely the boy caught this by whatever injured him in the leg. Joel will later dispose of this boy's body, showing almost no emotion. That part of him has long since been buried. I also like the signs which litter the QZ, such as signs of cordyceps infection, including coughing, slurred speech, muscle spasms, and mood change, so basically every time I drink. This one, however, is really interesting, showing how long it takes for the infection to spread depending on where you've been bitten. Neck and face, 5 to 10 minutes, torso, arms, shoulders, and hands, 2 to 8 hours, and legs and feet, roughly 12 to 24 hours. This is important considering Ellie is said to have been exposed to the infection 3 weeks ago, and yet she's fine. This is why she's tasked daily with counting to 10 and doing some other menial tasks to test her cognitive function.
7, 8, you.
Joel undertakes a series of odd jobs for these ration cards. In the game, we see people lining up to exchange these cards, and Boston is currently undergoing its 3rd week of half rations. It looks as though there are several different colored cards, which designate the amount of rations. The game also gives us a better glimpse of this walled-off quarantine zone. Boston is under what the Fireflies call authoritarian rule by FEDRA. They have enforced curfews, guards atop the buildings, keeping an eye on everyone, and even public executions. The irony here is that the executions take place in Boston's North Square, where founding fathers like Paul Revere lived and espoused the virtues of freedom and liberty. We can briefly see some red graffiti being cleaned that states the Firefly motto, "When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light." It's interesting then that the first shot of Ellie is her bathed in light. We'll later be introduced to the Fireflies, a revolutionary militia group intent on taking down FEDRA's authoritarian control. More on that in a bit. Joel is also a smuggler, establishing a network of contacts to get certain in-demand items. One such contact is a FEDRA soldier who he sells drugs to in exchange for ration cards and cigarettes. But Joel is planning something a little more elaborate. He wants a truck, but the problem is this guy can only get him a shitty one without a battery. This is where Robert comes in. Joel's partner in crime, Tess, paid Robert for a battery, but he ended up taking the money and trying to sell the battery to the Fireflies. Something that does not go well for him. In the game, it's not a battery at all, but weapons.
You think Robert's still got our guns?
For his sake, he better.
After his talk with the FEDRA soldier, we see Joel with the Firefly logo in front of him. Joel is a man who is lost in the darkness, and Ellie is his metaphorical light. Tess here has been mistakenly beat up by Robert's men. This is not good for Robert, who knows she's close with Joel, who he's scared of. In the game, Robert plays a larger role, essentially becoming the game's first antagonist. Their tete-a-tete is wrecked when an explosion lands Tess in the middle of a crossfire between the Fireflies and FEDRA. She'll later be picked up by FEDRA soldiers and and released. Our first meeting with Ellie, or if you prefer her fake name Veronica, shows just how feisty she is. She's being held captive by the Fireflies after they caught her escaping a Fedra facility for orphan children. If you want to know more about what happened to Ellie before she got here, check out the American Dreams graphic novel and the Left Behind DLC, which go over how Ellie got bitten and into Firefly custody. But for the purposes of this video, all you really need to know is that she was bitten and she is somehow immune. Other than these markings around the area of infection, she has no other side effects. So Ellie is extremely valuable, as she may be the key to unlocking a cure. Also, I like how this woman has duct tape on her belt, one of the key crafting components in the game. Those cigarettes have come in handy, as Joel is able to skip that line at the local radio operator. This seems to be one of a few modes of communication with limited access for people within Boston. Joel is hoping a message has come from his brother Tommy, who is currently in Wyoming. It's now been 3 weeks without any messages from Tommy, and he's used to at least getting a response within a day. This is why Joel is so adamant to get that truck. He believes Tommy is in trouble. After downing copious amounts of pills and whiskey, for me a typical Friday night, we see how Joel is still haunted by the death of his daughter, hearing her screams in his sleep. Tess comes and cuddles up with him in bed. In the game, the two have some flirty banter, but it's never known if their intimacy manifests as far as it does in the show.
It's like we're on a date.
Well, I am the romantic type.
At the Firefly headquarters, we meet Marlene, the head of operations here in Boston. Her compatriots want answers on why they're attacking seemingly meaningless targets, and why on earth do they have a random girl chained up. Marlene will later pass Kim a message from the radio tower in Salem. We never see what it says, but it's likely confirmation that Ellie has a mutated form of the infection and is indeed immune. Those random attacks aren't random at all. Marlene wants to divert attention away from their location so that a squadron of her men can escort Ellie out of the city. In exchange for some ration cards, Tess finds out Robert's location. She and Joel intend on getting their battery one way or another. Joel's even approached by a Firefly member looking to have him join the cause, but Joel is a lone wolf.
But if you're feeling lost,
Tell me to look for the light and I'll break your jaw.
Ellie is given her backpack back from Marlene. In it is a switchblade that used to belong to her mother, Anna. Not much is known about Anna, even little about her father, but Marlene befriended her mother before Ellie was born and promised to protect Ellie after she died giving birth. With Marlene the head of the Fireflies, a very dangerous position, she gave Ellie to the Fedra orphanage where she would be much safer and could keep an eye on her. There's a brief moment where Ellie calls the Fireflies terrorists and Marlene shoots back with,
Was Riley a terrorist?
in the Left Behind DLC, Riley is Ellie's best friend who was a Firefly. I won't spoil what happens to her, but with them using the past tense here, you can take a guess. It's here Marlene tells Ellie about her immunity and the Firefly's plans for her. Meanwhile, Joel and Tess make the dangerous trek to Robert's location and uncover a dead cordyceps. This is somewhat similar to the dead one they uncover in the game, who is a lot more fresh. Upon reaching their destination, they find out it's the Firefly headquarters, and the deal between Robert's men and the Fireflies has gone sour, leaving many dead and Marlene shot. What's worse, the car battery's no good, and out of nowhere, Ellie tries to stab Joel like... Marlene and Joel have a sordid past, with Joel believing Marlene was instrumental in turning his brother against him. But with Fedra surely on the way and Joel nowhere closer to getting out of the city, an interesting arrangement is proposed. If Joel and Tess deliver Ellie to the old state house, they'll provide him with anything he needs for his trip. Fueled up truck, weapons, supplies, the whole 9 yards. Joel and Tess never deliver human cargo, but they need this and decide to make an exception. Back at Joel's apartment, Ellie snoops around as Joel and Tess decide the next course of action. Inside Billboard's #1 hit books, Ellie finds a note containing a smuggler's code. When a song from the 60s plays, it means there's nothing in. The 70s, new stock, and 80s, an X. Ellie will later trick Joel into divulging what an 80s song means by telling him a song played while he was sleeping that was from the 80s. Judging by his look, 80s song means trouble. The final part of this note is this BF. BF referring to Bill and Frank, the two men Joel communicates with. We haven't met him yet, but Bill is played by Nick Offerman, and apparently there's a whole episode devoted to him and his backstory. Ellie's never been outside the quarantine zone her entire life, which is why she's so amazed to take everything in when they reach the outer walls. Unfortunately, they're busted by the same Fedra soldier who warned Joel that there would be extra patrols out considering the uptick in Firefly attacks. He uses his CBI scanner to detect them, but Ellie stabs him in the process, allowing Joel to unleash decades of rage after this situation conjures in him flashes of the night Sarah was murdered. I guess Ellie now knows what Joel is capable of.
What are they capable of?
Reaching for the scanner, Tess finds out that Ellie is infected, but Ellie tells them that the bite happened 3 weeks ago and no one lives past a day. This is what makes Ellie so special. She's immune, and with the sounds of Fedra soldiers quickly approaching, the team makes their way into the contaminated zone as Depeche Mode's 1987 song Never Let Me Down plays. As we know, an 80s song means trouble, and something tells me these guys are heading straight for it. Now I turn it over to you. What did you think of the first episode of The Last of Us? If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. I plan on covering every episode, and you'll want to stick around for that. For more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
Get this goddamn chain off me!
Look, girl, you've been running wild on me.